Hello everybody. Today is the day I finally trial Tailwind CSS. So, admittedly, I've avoided using Tailwind to be honest with you. I find using Bootstrap a lot easier, and the thought of just having to learn something new, I don't know. It's just I guess I haven't really had the capacity mentally to really delve into Tailwind CSS. So I have seen articles about it. I've seen people rave about Tailwind CSS. I thought, you know what, today's the day we're going to build a Aurelia project with Tailwind CSS in there, and then we're going to see if we can actually use it. How easy is it to work with? Um, Fortunately, in the Aurelia 2 docs, we have a guide here that tells us how to integrate Tailwind CSS. So I've already created an app, and I think we'll just get right into it. Move this to the side here. So npm install Tailwind CSS development package. And then we go node modules .bin Tailwind. Okay, well that's easy so far, isn't it? Apparently this will create a Tailwind config CSS file. Easy. So far, so good. Not too bad. Open your Webpack config file and add the flow into the post CSS loader. As the first item in plugins array. Add that in there. Okay. Add these lines to the top of your main CSS file. Tailwind base components and utilities. Okay. How to test it. An easy way to add the following Tailwind CSS snippet code to your project. Okay. So far, so good. But I mean, I haven't actually done anything so far, so we'll run this, and I just want to see if I actually did this correct. Holy smokes, something seriously bad has happened. That the... Is that how it's supposed to look? No, it's not. It's not meant to look like that at all. Um, okay. All right. What did we do wrong here? We didn't do anything wrong. From what I can see, there's no Tailwind styles in there whatsoever. Base. Wait, did I start this before I added that Tailwind configuration in there? I did. Because if it didn't build after I added that in there. No, so I didn't do anything wrong. Okay, let's go to the Tailwind documentation. CSS. Auto prefixer. Yep, we did that. So inside of our Tailwind, we should have Tailwind CSS. So post. I think post CSS is being configured inside of Webpack. Is plugins. Add the past all your template files in your... That tutorial. Unless I skipped over some stuff. Did I skip over some stuff? See if that does. seems promising. Yes. Okay, so this tutorial, I may have missed something. No, I followed it. The tutorial is wrong. I'll flag that. Basically, this content line here was needed. I'll update the tutorial with that. But, I mean, I can clearly see we've got some Tailwind styles in there now. Bit of a class soup, though, isn't it? Maybe I'll come around to it. I mean, I see the benefits of a utility library. It's just, I don't know, it looks like a lot. One thing that would help me, is there an extension for Tailwind CSS? Strikes me as the kind of library that would have one. Yes, Tailwind CSS Intellisense. Now the real question will be, does this work with Aurelia? And if this is just a plugin that, you know, normal HTML. Yes. Oh wow, look at this. Rounded EY padding top and bottom. X red 700. Water red 400. Okay, this is pretty damn cool. The Intellisense, I will admit. So if I were to just go div and then class equals, if I type, maybe I'm supposed to configure extension. Enable class name complete. Don't write class name and okay. So maybe GitHub Copilot is, maybe that's the problem here. See. Oh wow, this is really cool. So GitHub Copilot appears. Yeah. I mean, this auto completion stuff here is pretty damn cool. That's a nice cyan. In fact, actually, let's do this. We'll do a heading element in this color. Ooh. Hey, that is pretty awesome. I mean, I will admit, it seems like Tailwind CSS without auto completion extension would be a nightmare because you'd just be constantly like diving into the documentation to kind of work out what class name is what. We'll admit there is a lot here. It's a bit overwhelming, but I think the only logical thing here to do is what happens if we try and create a layout. So what kind of layout would we? Actually, you know, first and foremost, in this so important in this tutorial is merge settings, because otherwise you can have really bloated CSS. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to create. Oh, I deleted the HTML. I want to create a layout, Flexbox layout. I want a sidebar and I want content on the right hand side. So how would I do that in Tailwind? Would I go class equals X? Yeah. X, is that what you do? Yes, okay. So this is the first time I've actually legitimately Tailwind CSS. I'm just kind of using some Bootstrap intuition of mine to guess these class names. The auto completion doesn't seem to be completely reliable in this plugin for whatever reason. So if we go class equals flex basis 300. Basis. Did just get some auto completion there. What happened there? 8. It's using. Okay, 320 basis 80. That's pretty good. Now we want content area, and what would we put there? We'd want flex grow. Would grow just be the class? We'll admit Tailwind hasn't been as difficult as I thought it was going to be. Creating some. Spell them properly. Okay, if I wanted to make this an unstyled list, what is the list unstyled? Unstyled list. Maybe unstyled. List none. Okay, that appears to be what we want. We want a layout with display flex. That's right. 320 pixel responsive sidebar. This is pretty damn good so far. We want a container area that grows to the remaining size of the container, which it's doing 1600, and then size 800. Inside of our A side, we have a list, the style type none. Oh, look, and also list items and stuff, they already have the stuff removed here. It looks like there's a normalize or something being applied. So it assumes that lists don't have bullet points by default. Well, that's kind of nice because whenever I use them, most of the time, I'm stripping out the list styling anyway. Now, one of the problems we have here is our container isn't high enough. Height 100. How would I make the height 100 height? Okay, this one has me stumped. Tailwind document. Docs. What would that even come under? That would come under height. Okay, what have we got here? H-screen. I probably would never have got that myself, to be perfect. Okay, now we want our sidebar to be shade of, what color should we make it? Shade of red. So where's my background? Red 300 looks pretty. Okay, that's looking pretty layouty. And so far, I will admit, like, I don't know all the class names here, but I'm not hating it as much as I thought I would. You know, I see a lot of Tailwind examples. They're just like these massive class soup. But at the same time, I can see the benefits of this because I haven't written any custom CSS so far, which there's something to be said about that because you do end up duplicating a lot of CSS when you're using it, right? Like, it's just the nature of the beast. But this has been a surprisingly clean approach. And provided when it does build, it's not going to be bloated. I've got the purge settings enabled, so it shouldn't be. I actually think this is probably going to turn out really well. So what are we going to do here now? Sidebar needs some padding, right? So do padding. EYPX. Okay, this is another one I'm going to have to go to the documentation. Padding. Spacing. Padding. I want to add uniform padding around all sides. Use the P-size. P-, and then we go 4, 8, 12. I wanted 16, so I think 4 is pretty good, I think. I mean, that looks pretty damn good. That looks really good. We also want some padding on here as well, right? I mean, I'm liking this. I'm liking it so far. Interestingly, I noticed Tailwind. Have you noticed what it's done? Nothing has any default style on here. I find that very interesting. Like our heading, for example. Look at this. That's a heading 1. But it's got nothing. All the default styles are being like stripped. So it really is a blank canvas. So how do we adjust the size? What we're gonna do? Text extra large. Maybe 3XL. Or yeah, 3XL. That looks more like it. Font weight. Font dash bold. I mean, this isn't bad. This isn't bad at all. You know, Tailwind is not as bad as I thought it would be. Like I said, going into this, I avoided Tailwind because all the examples I've seen, it just seemed like, I don't know, it seemed like a step back in terms of styling, but it does require a little bit more work. So with Bootstrap, you kind of do, you know, you get some of that layout stuff and that, and you get a look out of the box. But with Tailwind, it's kind of making you do all the work, but at the same time, we've got utility classes for everything. Do we have CSS grid? Oh, look at this. We've got filters, blur. Yeah, that's pretty cool. You rotate. Scale. The drop shadows is one of those things I can never remember the syntax for CSS drop shadows. So this right here is handy. Contrast. Brightness. Got tables in here. I mean, I can see that if I were to start using this, I would have to consult the documentation. just until I've kind of touched upon enough in there that it becomes second nature. But at the same time, if my extension was working properly, um, what it should be doing is it should be recommending those class names. Got SpaceX. We got some layout stuff here by the looks of it. Okay, grid cols. Okay. Use the col span utilities to make an element span. Template rows. Auto flow. Auto columns. Okay, I can see how this would make working with CSS grid a lot easier as well. Because once again, I'm not too CSS grid syntax. So I feel like that could be a huge help in itself. What's it? Ah, look at this. We've got an aspect video class on here to do some of those aspect ratio properties. See, that's handy. That's really handy. I think Bootstrap does have that stuff too, but I have no idea what the heck X is for it. Because admittedly, I don't use it a lot. Ah, this is really interesting. Well, to me, they look like the same breakpoints that you get in Bootstrap, and you can create your own media query sizes in that. That's cool. Anyway, we're getting distracted. Let's go back to this layout that we're creating, which is coming along really well. I'm actually surprised. It has to be a class name. I don't know if that I even use. Oh yeah, it's using gap. Theoretically, if I went display flex direction column, that would work. Okay, well, how do we get display flex in there? Know that because we flex. Guessing flex column. Ugh. Oh, the auto completing's working. Look at that. Flex col. I mean, that's pretty cool. I like that. Cap 2. Wow, okay. So we've done a lot in here in a short space of time. And we need some content styling, so we'll go okay. Does it? How do we do margin bottom? Do we X MB? Okay, similar to Bootstrap. So I can see there's some similarities between Bootstrap and Tailwind in terms of some of these class names are kind of inspired. And I'm using some intuition from my Bootstrap experience to navigate around here. And it seems to be working out so far. I mean, I have struggled a little bit with some of this stuff, but for the most part, it's making sense. What if I wanted to cap the size of our container? I go in here and go div class, go like a max width. Max width. Okay, we've got some cool little classes in here. We want to make our max width like what? 800? Max width. Or something that was close, 3XL. So now we're going to move our content inside. and see how that looks. I mean, that looks pretty good. For someone who was a Tailwind virgin, you know what, 20 minutes ago, to actually doing something with it, it's a lot better than I thought it was, to be honest with you. And I've said that a few times, but it's true. I will admit, Tailwind has kind of, you know, blown me away a little bit. How easy it is to use. You know what? The classes aren't so much of an issue because I don't know, it just feels cleaner. I mean, as you can see, I've written no custom CSS so far to do this. Because most of the part when you are working, you are doing utility-based stuff like layout and that. You don't need to manually define that. And in the case of CSS Grid, I can't even tell you the default tags for that. Now, one thing that I do use Bootstrap for is forms. So I want to build a form with, I don't know, let's build a login form. Basically what I want is I want an email, password, and a login button there. So how are we going to do this? Copilot's trying to recommend something. Idea what? Anyway, we're going to go div, I assume div, but x. Class equals. Okay, this is the downside of, I don't know. No, it doesn't feel like there's anything about what I'm trying to achieve. So once again, we're gonna go to the docs. Now I'm assuming forms would be a big thing if they know people are coming from Bootstrap. So let's just find form. Official plugin. Do I have to install something? What? Okay, well, I mean, it looks like we have to install something else. Interesting. Okay. That's a little gotcha if you plan on using Tailwind. You probably will be working with forms, so you probably do want Tailwind CSS form. And it looks like in plugins inside of Tailwind big.js, add this in. It's not a big deal. Just that I kind of would have expected forms to be supported out of the box, especially if there's tree shaking involved, and it shouldn't really matter, should it? Okay. Now, how the hell do I work form elements? So from what I can see, adding stuff already. How do I label element? There's no example for building a form with maybe their app here. In their docs, it was missing on that repository. I just wanted to know how to do a nicely styled login form. That label. Okay, they're doing it so the label wrapping. Class equals block. Then they're doing a span inside there for some reason, inside the label. Okay. So we'll admit the forms stuff so far hasn't been as intuitive or fun as the rest. Still not a super big. Why is this not? Do I need to add something to this block? Margin top. Two. Grid calls 1 and okay. Okay, I mean our form doesn't look too bad. Only done one thing. The thing that I don't like about Tailwind, telling you right now that I can see this. What on earth is this? CSS classes for focus. I mean, focus. Oh, okay. I'm just gonna copy and paste all that. Hey. Okay, this is the one thing so far in all of this. I mean, I was liking Tailwind up until this point. This right here, working with forms. You know, the other stuff may have been cleaner, but and you know, this may make it so you can create whatever you want in terms of layout, but all of those, like, that looks pretty nice. But like, look at all these classes on here. That's a damn mess. And I can understand it. It's, you know, when you focus, we want a indigo light border. We want a drop shadow, which is what ring is. We want the opacity to be 50%. We want the ring color to be purple 200, so a little shade lighter. It makes sense. I get it. It's just this part doesn't feel intuitive to me because I would usually not use CSS classes for focus or hover styles. And I'm guessing in other parts of Tailwind, I'm guessing there's like a hover style as well. Just looking at this. Hover. Got here. Hover. Blue. Let's just see if this works. Yeah, we've added a hover state on there. I mean, that wasn't too bad, but this seems like a lot of classes for an input field. You know, I do like how in Bootstrap I can just go form control, form label, and it just everything falls in line. But at the same time, I know the criticisms of Bootstrap are it's rigid and your layouts tend to look bootstrappy, which I completely agree. I do tend to overstyle those things and change them for how they work, but the criticisms of Bootstrap are correct. This is just a new way of working for me. It's just really this. You know, I guess you don't need to have this stuff on all of your forms. Maybe in certain instances you just want plain import fields. But I don't know, that's a lot. That's a lot there. But the paradigm of being able to go focus, hover, and then do, you know, classes after that, that's pretty cool at the same time. But yeah, definitely not how I'm used to working. So what have we got here? We've got, create another one of these because we're doing a login form, right? Password. I mean, that looks not too bad. The one last hurdle that we need, and once again that I lean on Bootstrap for, is buttons. So what are we going to do for a button? I'm going to go button, say login. That looks terrible so far. See, you have to construct things by the looks of it using Tailwind out of the box, but I'm guessing I could create my own utility classes and put them into this file here. And then I could say .button, because in a real application, you don't want people manually creating their own buttons. I would be surprised if they didn't have some default button styles in here. Typography, backgrounds, borders, filters, interactivity. No. Use it to add more opinionated complex classes like button. Add components function allows you to register new styles in Tailwind's components layer. Use it to add more opinionated complex classes like buttons, form controls, alerts, etc. Sort of pre-built components you often see in other frameworks that you might need. Add a new component, styles. Okay, so that's pretty cool that you got it like a prefix type thing there. Where do I add that? I mean, this is another area I feel like it's a little bit trickier than just say a Bootstrap button class, but at the same time, not really. Can I reference other Tailwind classes from in here? Yeah, this is a little bit more involved, isn't it? I mean, the theory is you set this up with a style guide and then you don't touch it. And we have to use this ugly syntax here for everything's based. Let's do it. So we go button. We're going to go adding 0.5 rem, 1 rem. And we'll go button here. Oh, styles there. Okay. Good. And we probably don't want to set background colors on buttons by default. We probably want to go like background, and we'll go okay. We've got a little button here, and we'll go font semi-bold, make it pop a little bit. We also probably want those form inputs to span right across, don't we? So we go W full, I think. W full. I mean, that looks like a login form to me. So we've got quite a fair distance into this. Still, there are a few things with Tailwind that I've pointed out. So forms, obviously, that plugin does help, but working with forms is a little bit tricky out of the box because Tailwind doesn't seem to assume much. There are certain styles in your app that you don't want to be constructed. Buttons is one of them. I'd probably be inclined in this situation, just seeing the mess that's been created on those inputs, to go into my Tailwind config, and I would create some form input stylings as well, just to give me what, Bootstrap has, basically. This button, it probably needs like a default background color. The question with Tailwind I want to know is, can I access values already in Tailwind? Tailwind, custom class, get Tailwind. What's this? Are you telling me I didn't have to use the plugin here? What is this? What is this layer thing that these people are talking about? This may address one of the issues that I just had. When you need to add truly custom CSS rules to a Tailwind project, the easiest approach is to just add the custom CSS to your style sheet. For more power, you can also use the layer directive to add styles to Tailwind's base components and utilities layers. The layer directive helps you control declaration order by automatically relocating your styles to the corresponding Tailwind directive. This enables the features like modifiers and tree shaking in custom CSS. Oh, this changes the game. At layer. Base at layer. Okay, I'm getting rid of this junk in here. This CSS and JS approach is terrible. Oops. Oh. Definitely don't recommend that approach. But the fact that we can go layer, components, and then inside we can create a button class, presumably. Hey, what's this? What? Okay, so we want padding, and then presumably we can go theme spacing 4. What's that? Hang on, I've just made a rookie error. See if that one actually. Hang on, I put class button. Oh, that changes the game. Look at this. Missing 4. Way too much. Okay, well that's one of the pet peeves of Tailwind just solved for me just then. And this actually leads into a bigger solve of we would basically be able to do this to solve the soup issue as well. So I'm actually going to do that right now. That's really annoying me. I don't want to have to type all this junk out all the time. I just want to be able to go form put, right? Now, how do I apply all of this to my element? Form. let's comment this out for a second. Let's go apply. And we're getting the Intellisense. So block. No? How does apply work? Ah, you don't enter, you just literally, I see. Yes. Okay. We can just enter the class names in here. And we can do multiple ones as well. So in theory, I should be able to go like this. And this. I just took all those classes from the HTML and moved them into CSS. And it works. Okay. Well, we've made some discoveries here today. I feel like this has been a pretty productive first introduction to Tailwind. So we went from all of that soup, this, to this, form input. And we can go like this. And for our buttons, I mean, we can actually go by we want a variant of this button. So how do we do variants? I just kind of wanted to know modifiers, maybe. No. We've got a layer. I wanted to do like, say you had a button large. Using Tailwind, you probably don't need these types of classes often. Oh yeah, you think something else? Yeah. Well, I respectively disagree with that notion. For buttons, especially, you don't want people composing those manually. You want control over them, especially for style guides. So buttons, you want those to be predefined button styles. And we've got a button. A button style is being applied, and happy days. I think this is enough Tailwind CSS for now. Let's just talk about what we've actually accomplished here, because we've gone from I had no Tailwind knowledge whatsoever. Like, we went from the super basics of this is my first time using this tool, and I will admit I got a lot further than I thought I would, and I struggled a lot less than I thought I would too. This is a different paradigm to me, but obviously it's CSS classes at the end of the day, but it's knowing what classes are available, which the Intellisense extension for VS Code helps with, and I definitely recommend installing that. That issue where I wanted to create custom styles, and the documentation was recommending that where is it? The documentation pointed me in this direction of using a CSS and JS approach, where you saw I opened up the Tailwind CSS configuration file and I was writing them in code, and it didn't feel right until I came across that Stack Overflow question, and it led me to that and adding the styles in here. So pretty good for a first use. I think I would use Tailwind CSS again, and there are definitely solutions to some of the concerns, like the soup and whatnot. Although I will admit, like the form input, there is some soup here, but I think I could come around to it. At the same time, I've written very little CSS, and I feel like it'd be a nice, skinny app that's nice and controlled from a style perspective. So we'll revisit in another video, but for the most part, what a great introduction to Tailwind CSS.